So everybody, this is a public service announcement. We are now commencing the recording of this session, which means any secret that you tell from now on will become public. Thank you. Welcome to this talk about the secret way to success as a TYPO3 developer. Thank you very much for coming. This is not the most important slide. This is the most important slide. This is me. I am Mathias Lesniak. I am from outside Oslo, Norway. I have a wife and 2 kids. You can see a picture of my kids if you come and look at my phone. I have been doing TYPO3 since 2003. Do you know what I did in 2003? More specifically, I crashed my first TYPO3 installation. Yep. And I tell that in almost every talk that I do because it has one important lesson in it. I crashed the first TYPO3 installation that I made. I was really upset at TYPO3. I went away for 6 months, tried to write my own CMS in BASIC. And then I had to crawl back and ask for forgiveness. So that was the year 2003 for me. Yeah. And since then, I've become the TYPO3 project ambassador, which means that I go around and ambassadorize for TYPO3 around the place. One of my roles there is also to do talks like this one. And one of my goals is to make talks like this one that other people can do as well. Leaves more holiday for me. How many here have actually read the description text for this talk? Quite a few people, right? So you know that there is no secret way to success as a TYPO3 developer. And that's of course because, I mean, there's no secret way, but well, at least my impression very often is that, I can sit and code. I do communicate as well, talk to people, but I also do quite a bit of coding. And then I work and I solve problems, and then I think back on the day, and I've really only been focusing on one problem maybe, but I just can't remember how I solved that bloody problem in the end. It's a lot of stuff that just goes past, and you've learned it, but you're never going to tell anyone that you've learned it, right? So this session has 2 goals, of course, talking about some lessons learned and things to try out to become a better TYPO3 developer, because it's not a secret. To be a successful TYPO3 developer, you also have to talk about how you are a developer. And we're going to go through the perspectives that you are missing, and I include myself in that you. We're also going to talk about the obvious tricks that we don't talk about, right? So all that I know is that I don't know anything. This is a guy called Socrates. He was one of the first developers. I'm leaning on him because I know that I don't know what I don't know, right? You don't know what you don't know. So I'm going to tell you what I think I know. And then you're going to tell me what you think you know. And then we'll become wiser together. And the thought is, with this talk, that I've got some secrets, or whatever you want to call it, that I put into this talk. And then I'm hoping that we can follow these 2 rules when we do this session. So I'm going to present my secrets, right? That's okay. And then you raise your hand whenever you remember something that might actually be a secret and you haven't told anyone, but it's really, really helpful. If we all agree it's really, really helpful, which I hope we do, I might even write it up here. And then I might include it in the talk. And the next time you're on a camp, You can go, oh, I will know lots of secrets about TYPO3. And then you can hold the talk, right? And then we learn from each other. Okay? This was the first secret that I learned about TYPO3. And I mean, we're talking 2004, maybe 2005, because yes, you might say that this is obvious for any developer, but it actually took me a bit of time to realize that, well, TypoScript isn't just, it's not a programming language. It's not a secret sect or anything like that. It's the real thing that sort of made it go aha for me is that when you write 10 equals text, that becomes 10 array key and then text as a string. And then when you write, yeah, see, he's saying no. Mhm. Exactly. That's the thing. That's the key. 10 might be a key, but then 10 dot something is the array with all of the stuff that you put inside of the brackets after the 10 equals text, right? Wow. That saved me a lot of time. And since then, I've loved TypoScript. I didn't before, but after that. And then the other thing that happened to me, and I mean, like he did, please feel free to object if there's anything as well. But also if you have fantastic ideas, we love those. I've also been saved by standard wrap. Yeah. And I talk to people, and that seems to be a very sort of black and white thing in the TYPO3 community. Either you're like, oh, standard wrap, I love you, or you really, really hate standard wrap. And I understand both sides. I'm kind of gray and in the middle. Standard wrap can be used to do all kinds of really weird things. You can have a normal text that you want to place on a page, and then you suddenly pick that text from a database query or from the query string or an environment variable, or you add it together in some really obscure ways, and you can actually insert your whole TYPO3 website inside of that standard wrap whenever you see it, even if it's a configuration variable for, root page, for example. You can put your entire website in there, and TYPO3 will just try to parse it as an integer. But standard wrap is also one of the things that other CMSs do not have. I've been saved by standard wrap because I suddenly needed something that was slightly beyond what the developer had originally thought. And I could use standard wrap to hook in exactly what I wanted. And in that way, yes, standard wrap can be a lot of mess, but for goodness sake, make it configurable, right? That has saved me a lot of times. Whenever you develop something or you have a variable where it's a possibility, even a remote possibility, that someone might actually want to change that in the configuration, make it configurable. Because you don't want to patch your code in order to change something really basic. Yeah. Oh, I've struggled with that. Secret number 3. I don't know if everyone agrees here, but writing good code, and I mean, I've worked with different bosses. I've been my own boss as well, and that's hard. But there is some kind of border where you actually have to deliver to the client. But what I find out is that if you actually plan your code and don't deliver to the client for a while, it might actually create better code than just trying to do something without planning beforehand. And a lot of the secrets coming after here actually are about what you do in those 80%. Like this one. I once took over an extension that had like a few thousand lines of code. A few thousand lines of code that had to be upgraded every time there was a new TYPO3 version. thousands of lines of code that had to be cared for, had to be read. Every new developer had to get to know them. But essentially, what this extension did was the same as you can achieve by the list content object and some pages. Because it was really just what you can put on pages as content, categories it had, and some lists. And it might be fun as a developer to write a lot of code, but if you actually use the core components of TYPO3 in what you do as a developer, all of the developers that come after you are going to say thank you. And whoever has to upgrade the TYPO3 installation next, well, TYPO3 actually upgrades pretty well if you use only the core components, right? You don't even need Rector, even though it's a godsend, right? The next thing, and this has saved me a lot of times, actually sit down and read the core utilities. General utility, for example, 3,186 lines of love. Stuff that you would otherwise have to do yourself, you can suddenly do with just one line, right? Anyone have a favorite general utility method? Yes? Trim exploit, mine too. I totally agree. It's just so helpful, right? No, I'm going to make it myself. I'm going to use filter and I'm going to use explode. And yeah, but it's actually really helpful if you know the things that TYPO3 has already done for you. You can save so much time. Really, you can. And in that way, you should really try to know TYPO3 like a farmer knows his land. You know what I mean? I know that. How many of you know a farmer? Yeah, there's a couple of people. Well, the farmer is the good developer, right? He walks his land. He looks at, is it growing well here? Oh, there's something I have to fix. There's a fence with a hole in it, that kind of stuff. And walking the land like a farmer is something you can and should do in TYPO3. Because if you know your land, you're going to make more out of that land. If you wonder how something functions, yes, you can read the code, but it's actually easier sometimes to just step debug with xdebug and just go through it and see, oh, that changes there, that happens. Oh, there's actually something I can use. There's, xdebug is more than just debugging. It can also teach you a lot about TYPO3. The next secret has a lot of the word best in it. It's 3 times. The best practice is a shared best practice. And there is a project that I've been working on where, I'm not going to mention it now, but it was about, let's say it was 10 agencies that got together to do something really good together. And everyone came with their best practices. And everyone used their best practices. And the result was not best practice, because everyone had their own best practice. And sometimes, if you have a best practice and everybody else has their own best practice, that isn't actually a best practice. The best practice, even though you might have to admit to some things that you don't like in it, it's actually a better best practice when you agree on what you're going to do, right? So don't have those fights over who's got the best practice. Find out how you can combine the best practices in the best way. That was a lot of the word best, right? Okay. Another secret that I learned in, really in 2003. So it should come earlier, but yeah, you can't do it better, can you? Yeah. You can't do it better. You look at that extension and you say, oh, I can do that better. Yeah, because that's what open source is all about. You look at the code and you say, oh, that's crap. No, you can make it better, right? You can contribute. You can make a fork, make a pull request, bring it back in. And yes, I know there's some developers that are really busy with developing other things and don't have time to merge in your pull request or stuff. But I mean, that's when we need to collaborate, right? Try to get more people in as contributors, try to talk together, and don't get irritated because somebody has little time. That can happen to everyone, but always try to find a solution that includes others than yourself. And that is nice and friendly. There is one other thing that is really, really hard sometimes, and that is to show people that you don't know. Who has ever been in that situation where you've got this daunting thing that you don't know how something functions, but you really don't want to, expose that to your boss who might think that you don't deserve your wage or something like that. Have you ever experienced that? Yes. The say
My go-to is actually to ask before. I think it's good teamwork. If you know the hierarchy in your film, then you just know who to ask first, but you need to know how to do it. Actually, Y- it's a kind of the very delicate of how people do it because we are all doing it different. But usually, it's very good to ask and not do stuff by yourself because then you have 3 days of development, you come with something, you merge it, and then everybody pretty knows that you just wrote a bunch of stuff that are useless. Yeah. So, and usually I wouldn't go to my boss to ask. I mean, it depends. I will go to the team and ask. I don't go to the boss because usually the bosses they don't know a lot about this anyway, no? I'm the man.
I like to hear my own voice. No, but that's really true what he said. And I mean, daring to ask is the first step to learning, right? And often when it comes to TYPO3, it's about daring to ask questions in public fora. And I know it's really, I mean, Slack is not a public forum, actually. Uh, what you write in there, yes, you get an answer. It's a nice conversation, but it doesn't actually make it accessible to the next person who has the same question and feels the same amount of stupid. And stuff like talk.typo3.org, which we're trying to enliven and make more lively. And yes, we actually threw someone out yesterday for posting advertising. So we're also looking at it more closely. But it's actually indexed by search engines. Who here uses search engines? Oh, yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and what happens when we use it more is that the results from there come higher up in search results. They've already started coming at the top, which is really good. And we can help create a database of really good answers. And yes, feel free to use other systems as well. But this one is actually owned by TYPO3, which is, yeah, ownership is kind of important, right? Yeah. This is hard sometimes, and I know that myself as well. Sometimes you can't be enough humble, but it's something about opinion, Your personal opinion might not be the best opinion, even if you're the best person around, right? It's not a global standard. So if somebody says that, well, I like to do it differently, or I actually have facts that say that this is a better way to solve a problem, just calm down, breathe a couple of times, listen, look at where you might bring something constructive into the process and continue from there. Because a few weeks back, I was at the United Nations headquarters in New York. That felt big for me, but I was at a big conference there about open source. And why does the United Nations care about open source? Well, it turns out that the United Nations sees in open source some of what can save the world, you could say. The Sustainable Development Goals. Have you heard about those? There's 17 of them, and they go on all kinds of things. But open source really has a culture in it. Well-working open source has a culture in it that is positive for the world. Open source is not just code. It's about how you collaborate, how you do things together. And yes, cultural exchange can be hard. People coming from different cultures can have a difficulty collaborating, but trying to collaborate, well, it makes us better people. It teaches us stuff. And open source really opens that up for us. I think that's important to think about, that when we work with other developers, when we try to exercise open source in real life, it is a little bit like coming from a different culture, speaking to people who don't speak exactly the same language. And we have to think about that. It is not just code, it is culture. I mean, of course, we want to say, what we're good at, but some of the most helpful sessions that I have ever been to at bar camps, for example, is the sessions that are not recorded, but where you sit down with a group of people and you talk about your biggest failures, your biggest mistakes, and of course, what you learned from them. Because talking about those can help a beginner, it can help someone who's been in the business for 20 years, but it can really make people feel more confident by knowing that others have also failed. That's important. What we need is people who actually dare to say what they mean, who dare to fail, who dare to learn new things. Yeah. And of course, I mean, just complaining is just not good, right? If you have a complaint, try to help solve it. I'm not going to say more about that because that's really basic. Mhm. In the TYPO3 world, it's all about collaboration. You can join a team. Now, I've written team there, but it doesn't have to be an official team. But if you have something that you're interested in, try to work with people who are also interested in that. That points back to the thing about best practice. If you're interested in something, doesn't mean that you know all of the really cool ways of doing that. By working together with people, you learn. Join a team, collaborate, look at what other people do. And I mean, I'm going to quote Benny Mack, be quiet. Benny says that he sometimes goes and looks at Georg's news extension when he's looking for the best way of doing something, right? That's how we do it. We look at what one person does and, aha, I learned something there. That's a new way of doing it. I had 10 lines of code. That's just one line of code. I learned something. Of course, you can join the TYPO3 Association. That's not a secret. I've been saying it for the last few days. But one of the things for joining the TYPO3 Association is that, well, firstly, you actually get a vote in the association. The association works with the long-term strategy of TYPO3. And, well, if you want to complain, you at least can't complain without being a member, right? The membership sort of gives you this fantastic status. It gives you a cape that can flow behind you. If you have zits, like I do sometimes. they disappear. If you're a man, you don't have to shave. You sort of, yeah. There's so many good things that happen if you become a TYPO3 association member. And it is this thing about actually taking responsibility, not just complaining, but taking part in the decision-making process, even if it is just in a couple of weeks' time to go in on the website and vote for the budget idea that you think deserves a budget most. Now that we've talked about the really serious topic, go for a walk, I actually had to learn that. I used to sit, I mean, I've had a home office for eons since I started. But I had to learn that it doesn't help to just sit there and bang my head on the table or the screen or the keyboard, especially if I do the keyboard because it writes lots of weird stuff. But actually taking my eyes off what I'm doing, hey, that's some of the things that we also do here at the developer days. We don't always just sit and listen to talks. We walk around, we see people, we talk to people, we get new impressions. And it's good for your brain. Your brain sort of frees up when it has other things to look at. And then there's, I don't know what it's called, but there's a part of your brain that starts working subconsciously, right? And when you've freed up, you're all relaxed, you come back to your computer, you've solved the problem. Well, it doesn't always happen, but it happens sometimes. And then when you've solved the problem, what do you do then? Yeah, you document. One of the things that I've found out is really helpful, actually, is when I have a problem and I'm looking for a solution in the documentation, the TYPO3 documentation and extension documentation, whatever, and I don't find it, well, I try to solve the problem anyhow, and then I return to where I expected the solution to be, and I contribute it in. And it doesn't have to be something long, but it might be a missing word even, you know? It says you have to always do this. It doesn't just suggest that you might want to do this, right? Yeah. And then another thing that I've learned really recently, and this is the final secret for me, it is to look beyond TYPO3. Other CMSs, other PHP developers sometimes have done stuff so that you don't need to do it again. And we've been really bad at that in the TYPO3 community, in the Drupal community, in the Joomla community, in the WordPress community. Pretty much everywhere, we're really good at saying that, we're the best, so let's not look at anything else. I recently, for another talk, I looked at the transliteration libraries for our different content management systems. Transliteration is the thing when you have the German O with the dots over it and you make it into O or OE or something like that. Depends a bit on the language, but it's pretty much just a translation table. How hard is it to make a translation table? Well, it's pretty hard to make the first time, and then you just have to keep maintaining it. It doesn't change. There's no better way of making a translation table. It's just a table. That turns into that. That turns into that. Those kind of things. And still, Drupal has one. Joomla has one. TYPO3 has one. WordPress has one. And even Symfony has one. Imagine how much time we spend on repeating the work all the time. So don't just look into the TYPO3 core. Look if somebody else has done it. Look if you can save time by learning from others. And we've gone so far now with TYPO3 that we've actually created the Open Website Alliance with these other three CMSs. Yeah, that was kind of the reaction from some people. I think that picture actually is for something else, but it's we're sometimes so afraid that we might expose our own weakness that we don't want to learn from others. It's a fear that we have, a vanity. And to be really good at open source, we actually have to let go of that. We have to wipe our minds clean and just look. And sometimes we see that, yes, we do have some things we do really well, actually. And there are other things that we might actually want to learn from others when we do. And remember this also between agencies. Competition isn't about a share of the market. It's actually about trying to grow the market. Right? If everyone always tries to take business away from each other, you're thinking about business as a very finite resource. But why should you do open source if you think that everything is finite? Open source is about collaboration. It is about making more together. It's about making 1 + 1 become 3. It's about collaboration, about working together, about being honest, and about believing in yourself enough that you can actually go out there and say to people that, I don't know this. Can you help me? Or for another person to say, well, crossing that bridge from feeling I have never done this before. Who am I to tell somebody else what to do? Well, do it. Even if you have the smallest idea, it might help someone. It might help someone save a day. It might save someone a week. It might save the world. Thank you.